Hey everybody. So I just wanted to do a a project retrospective for CodeLogic, just to take a look back and see how things went. So first off, what's the purpose of this retrospective? It kind of ties into the continual improvement, mantra of plan, do, check, act. Um, we don't always do everything perfect the first time, but we want to just dive right in. So we make a plan and we do it. And then once we've done it, we take a look and we see how we've done. We check. We kind of maybe identify the things that went well and the things that need improvement, and then we act on that. Things that went well. How do we make sure that those keep happening? Things that need improvement. What can we do to improve those situations? And then we plan our next increment, keeping all of that information in mind, learning from our previous iteration, and then we do it, and we keep going around and around and around to hopefully, arrive at a better result every time we do something. So to that end, I want to take a look back. I do these retrospectives kind of internally for a lot of things, but I wanted to do, like a project one. So I'm going to take a look back over the course of CodeLogic, and I want to review the project goals that I set out for myself at the very start. And then I want to identify things that went well, and finally identify areas of improvement. So moving on, I had three core goals, well, actually two, but they kind of expanded over the course of the project. But three core goals that I wanted to achieve with this game. And so the first one was complete a full game. I've done lots of game over the years, and like little technical demos, but never that start to finish something that I would consider ready to be shipped to the public. So I wanted to gain that experience. The second thing I wanted to do was release it, which I haven't done yet, but I'm in the hardening phase, and it's something that I'll do after I get back from vacation. But it still kind of ties in. I have a ready to release game, even though it hasn't actually been put out. It is ready. Finally, I wanted to utilize quality practices, specifically unit testing and solid design principles on this game. I had learned a lot about these in my last couple of years at my previous job, and I really wanted the opportunity to put them to use on a start to finish development. I had a lot of experience applying them to existing software. The product that I worked on was like over 20 years old, and that, came with its own unique challenges and rewards, but I'd never had the opportunity to apply that to something new. So I wanted to do that here. And I think that, as far as these three goals go, I've accomplished them. I feel that I've done what I've set out to do. So, with that, let's take a look at the things that went well in this project. There were lots of things that went well. When I get to the needs improvement, there were a lot of things that needed improvement. I just picked, the top three to focus on. So the first thing that I thought went well is that I had a lot of fun doing this. I've always been that person who, enjoys coding, just does it for fun. I got into it when I was a kid, junior high, and it really became a passion of mine. Um, the past couple of years at my previous job, got really busy and really stressful, and I kind of lost a little bit of that passion. So this was a great way to rediscover that, and I think that that happened. I'm working on something that was just a game, for entertainment, to make something neat, at least from my perspective. I think that that was great, and I want to keep that passion and that fun going forward. Something else I thought went well was the solid and testing aspect of it. Um, I have a couple of slides following this one that'll talk a little bit more about that, but I think that that really enabled my development practices. Solid fed into testing, testing fed into confidence in the code that I have, and that the requirements that I had identified had been met. And I think that went well, and I think that's something to continue. A lot of people don't, employ these techniques on their games. I've noticed, at least in the independent developer type of aspect, and I don't know. I just thought it was really beneficial, so I want to keep that going. I do have to make a few changes, but we'll come back to that. The last thing that I went well was I learned a lot. I really enjoy learning, and I really enjoy, trying new things. And I think having, a project like this, something that I was already passionate and engaged in, really helped drive that and really helped focus. Also want to give a shout out to the folks at the Monogame community site. Really appreciate the help and support trying to figure things out as I was learning new things. And so, I think that for projects like these, it's important to continue to learn and to look for those opportunities to learn and to drive yourself to become better. And so that's something to again capture in the next project and to make sure that I'm being aware of. So now I just want to take a few slides to talk about, solid and unit testing in the monogame environment, things that I thought went particularly well about that. So solid is a bunch of programming principles that help make better code. It's probably put much more eloquently online, but that's the gist of it. And two of those principles I found really came into play in this project, and that was Liskov substitution, which is really just about designing components that interact on a contract. So, like interfaces, saying, hey, I need to deal with an object that does, these things. And then I don't really care how it accomplishes those goals as long as it does. And then to extend that further is the idea that you can then replace any of those components with another component that satisfies that contract, but maybe in a different way. Really quickly, maybe the classic example is your program needs to persist data somehow. It needs to retrieve it and store it so that it can get that data between sessions. You might write an interface that defines a contract that you can store or retrieve data. But then you might create an implementation of that interacts with the file system. Maybe later on down the road you want to replace that with something that interacts with the with a SQL database or maybe the cloud. Stuff like that. You should be able to just give your system a component that implements the interface, and the system should just work. And then the other thing was dependency inversion, which is, instead of um, putting, functionality like the persistence directly into the components that you have, you just give them another component that handles that for it. And they don't care, where that came from or how it was achieved, just that they got it and now they have something that can do that work. So I was able to kind of utilize those two principles to effectively, wrap my monogame objects. I defined those contracts and gave dependencies to other objects that said, oh, okay, cool. Now I'm going to do these monogame things, but I don't really care that monogame is involved. I just want something that can do X. And to do this, I focused on just the key functionality that I needed. I'd say, okay, well now I need to draw a texture to the screen, so I would do all of the things that I needed to achieve that. And then say now I want to draw text to the screen. And I just kind of followed that until I got all of the functionality that I wanted. And it turned out it worked really well, and it was pretty easy to do. And then all of that really fed into enabling me to create unit tests. I was able to use on all those interfaces something called N substitute, which is a mocking framework. It lets you create fake versions of or fake implementations of interfaces, and it will allow you to define behaviors or check that behaviors or methods or properties. It lets you confirm everything, so it lets you write tests. And all told, I generated about 2,600 tests for this game, which is quite a bit. More tests than I've ever written for much larger systems in the past, which led to me having a really high confidence in you know in my code and paid off when I had to do a lot of things like refactors. I'd go change some functionality, and then I'd have tests that would say, "Oh, no, just so you know, you broke this. You got to fix this, or maybe it doesn't work like you expected anymore, so you got to change your testing approach." Really helpful. And then, just an example here of kind of what I was doing on the monogame side to utilize the solid programming principles and where my testing points would be. Um, so I'm just gonna, I don't know if you can see my cursor or not here, but on the left-hand side we have kind of like, the monogame stack. This is just a small slice of it. You got a sprite batch, which is a class responsible for, effectively drawing textures to the screen. It does text too, which ends up being a texture. Not important. Anyway, you've got a monogame sprite batch class, and then you've got a monogame game class, which handles, just the game update and draw logic. It has a mechanism behind the scenes to make sure that those update and draw methods are being called at the appropriate timing. And so, all I did was, when I wanted to say draw text to the screen, I defined a sprite batch interface that had, the functionality that I wanted, and then I implemented a monogame sprite batch class that just wrapped the monogame side. And, because I needed to create those things, I also made a simple factory behind an interface. And then I gave that to, an engine object. And the monogame game class, which is always going to be your entry point, interacts with that CodeLogic engine. So now the CodeLogic engine can use, the sprite batch factory to create sprite batches, give those to components, give the factory to components so that they can create sprite batches, and then they can do the work. And then this gave me, right here on this side of the diagram, an area where I could test. And I could also test the CodeLogic engine and its components because they interacted with stuff over here that were just an interface, and I didn't have to worry about the stuff over here. So anyway, thought that went really well, and that's all there is to really say about that. So now let's kind of move on and talk about the things that need improvement, the things that I thought didn't go as well. So the first thing was my testing approach. Really happy with the tests, really happy with the way that they turned out and what they enabled me to do. But I think that, maybe I just was a little bit too rigorous in my testing approach. And by that I mean, this was a new area for me. And I'd learned a lot about it, or a lot about. I've written a lot of tests in the past, but I've never done that start to finish development. So I just said, what, I'm just going to test everything and see where we end up. And it took a long time, and that's okay. Testing adds value, but at the cost of time. But I think that, I think maybe going forward in the future, I could kind of dial back what I focus on. Maybe sticking to the high value tests, things that add the most value, and steering clear of maybe getting caught up in testing things that aren't a big deal, things that maybe aren't likely to change, or things that you know like simple get set property tests. If I don't actually do any logic there, I probably don't need to do any testing, because it's not somewhere that's likely to go wrong. And I've learned a lot about those areas where things are likely to go wrong. I don't know. I'll give it a shot, see how it goes, and then maybe in the next retro, I'll have something else to say about that. Um, the next thing that I think needs improvement was how I handle my non-coding tasks. I'm fairly well, I'm not going to go ahead and say I'm the best coder, but I've been doing it for a while, and I've got a lot of strategies for solving problems and figuring things out. I feel like I'm really effective in that area. But, because this was a full game, I had to do things like create artwork or edit sounds, and those are things that I don't really know what I'm doing very much at all. So it was a learning process. And, when you get stuck or bogged down or frustrated and you don't have a wealth of knowledge to fall back on, you find, or at least I find myself, getting stuck or not quite knowing how to proceed. And then you get sidetracked, because you're like, oh, I need to do this thing. I have to have this done, you know, but I can't figure it out. So I need to, take a break and blah, blah, blah. And I think that just wasn't really effective the way that I did that. So, I think going forward, I kind of ran into this in the last step. I kind of had a bit of an epiphany, but going forward, I think I want to try to treat these tasks separately, instead of just starting them, expecting to finish them, and then release them. I kind of want to maybe put them in like maybe a parallel stream of tasks where I work on them with the expectation that I'm going to get them done. But if I get bogged down, I can just pause them and then go pick up another task, maybe work on that, clear my head, and come back. So that way I always have something to work on, and I'm not, feeling like I'm blocking myself just because of a lack of knowledge or an underdeveloped skill. I don't know. We'll see how that goes. I do like to stick to like the agile workflow of user stories and such, but maybe I just need to try a change here to see how I can overcome that. And then, the last thing that I want to talk about for needs improvement is scheduling. When I started the project, I deliberately didn't schedule anything. I didn't really know how to estimate. I didn't know how things, how long things were going to take. So I said, okay, you know what? I'm just going to focus instead of, going overboard on project management. I'm just going to focus on getting stuff done. And I think that was good. That went well. But I think I needed to have those milestones and that timeline to be able to focus on. Um, just following a "it'll be done when it's done" thing, it was nice. It was not as much pressure, but having that focal point is good too. So I think in the next project, um, creating those timelines ahead of time, maybe just starting simple, but creating some timelines and some milestones will just give me a focal point to help say, okay, I want to have this amount of functionality achieved by this point. And because I've got the experience now of working in this environment and developing things um, in monogame, I can better schedule that and I can better be able to tell when I'm going off track and when I need to maybe reduce scope for a milestone or something like that. So again, something that I think I'm just gonna try and see how it goes. So that's it. Thank you for watching. This is me just continual improvement, trying to take a look at how things went and improve. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks. Bye.